Welcome to the Open Sourcing Mental Illness Podcast. Each episode is an interview with someone from the tech community that's been impacted by mental health issues. Hello, my name's Joe Ferguson. I'm a board member for the Open Sourcing Mental Illness, a 501c3 nonprofit that's a charity that is focused on changing how we talk about mental health in the tech industry. Today I'm talking with fellow Memphian Jason Charnes. Jason, say hello.
Hello.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me tonight. This was on relatively short notice, too. I put a call out, and you were one of the first people to respond.
I'm glad to do it. I appreciate you asking me to join you.
So I know you have done some speaking for the mental health prompt. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with that.
Yeah, so prompt I found online, I think through Twitter, and it really kind of resonated to me. They're a mental health nonprofit trying to do kind of similar things that open sourcing mental illness is doing, which is just make people aware of these kind of issues in tech. And I was like, that's great. So I was like, hey, do you guys need any more speakers? And they're like, not right now. I was like, okay, that's cool. Can I do anything else? And so I actually came on at first as a sticker sponsor. And then I was like, cool, whatever I can do to help. And then I guess about a year later, one of the main organizers, PJ Haggerty, he put on a conference in Buffalo, and so I went up there and got to speak at that, not about mental health, but actually about Ruby-related stuff. And then, we kind of hit it off from there, and I joined the speaker lineup, and my first prompt talk will be in Columbia, at RubyConf Columbia in September.
Oh, awesome. Excellent. Yeah, I've met PJ at a couple different PHP conferences, and I've met Davey Sheffick is still involved with them, is the mental health prompt as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've met Davey several times at PHP conferences.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he was actually at that conference I was at in Buffalo.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I can't remember where I met Davey at, but I think I met PJ at either Sunshine PHP or Tech for the first time in Chicago, maybe. It's been a while. So you're a Ruby developer. Tell us about what you do and kind of how you came into the different communities.
Yeah, so I started as a front-end developer, a poor one at that, and then picked up a little PHP, and around that time that I was picking up PHP, I started kind of figuring out, there's a thing called a framework, and at that time it was mostly Cake PHP, if I remember correctly, and Laravel, I think, was just like version 2 or 3, so I started kind of looking at it. But then I found Ruby and Rails, and I abandoned to the dark side. And I've been writing Ruby and Rails since 2012. I work for a company now called Lens Rentals. We rent camera equipment out of here in Memphis, and been trying to involve myself in much of the Ruby community as I can.
Awesome. Yeah, we actually met through the Memphis Tech community. I believe we met at either a tech camp or one of the PHP meetups or one of the web workers meetups. I can't remember. It's been a while.
Yeah. What was it? Oh, we had lunch at Huey's that day.
Oh, yeah, that's
randomly.
Right. Yeah.
I was working downtown, and I just seen you pop
yeah.
up in the PHP community, and that's how I started getting plugged into the tech community here.
Awesome, yeah. So let's see, what else? So what made you get involved with the mental health prompt, or what made you want to help out with a topic like mental health?
So I am a struggler of anxiety. I have general anxiety disorder, which isn't awesome. Could be worse, but I also have obsessive compulsive disorder, which makes the generalized anxiety disorder horrible. So it's something I didn't discover till later on in life that I had. I thought when I was younger that was just a normal thing that everybody went through. And so when I realized what was going on, it was important for me to share that with other people. I'm pretty open about most things, and actually the first time I ever kind of decided it was important for me to share was at a RailsConf. It was my first ever tech conference, and they had lightning talks, and then there was technical error, and I was like, we were just kind of sitting there, and they're like, we need somebody to just come up and talk for like 60 seconds. And I don't know what it was because, as I said, I have anxiety, so I didn't really want to get up and speak in front of people. But I did, and I just kind of talked about for 60 seconds how I struggle with anxiety, and I just want people to know they're not alone. And I got a fair amount of response from that, which was really neat and kind of made me realize that, hey, this is something maybe I should be sharing more. And so when I found Prompt, it was kind of like molding the two things together.
Awesome. Yeah, I also suffer from random anxiety issues, among other things, and I can definitely understand where you're coming from, especially in terms of getting up in front of other people and speaking. And that's one of the things that has been my challenge in getting into conference speaking, because I've done a fair number of conference events in the past several years, and it never gets easier. It's one of those things where you think it's going to get easier, but it really never does. So what would be your advice to somebody that is struggling with mental health issues and trying to figure out where to go? What advice would you have for somebody like that?
I can speak to my own circumstances probably best, obviously. But for me, it was trying to find someone safe to talk to, and that was a counselor in my case. There are a lot of good counselors here in Memphis. I saw someone who made me not only like realize that I was okay, but that like I was safe, and really helped me not only get these anxieties and obsessive habits kind of out in the open, but helped me learn to work through them. And I couldn't defeat them, but I could learn how to live with them. And that was probably the game changer for me, was learning how to live with it and realizing that it's not something I can just defeat in my case. And I live a much better life because of it.
Yeah, for me, it took me a really long time to try to get help, because I never thought that my issues were bad enough. And it took seeing Ed Finkler's talk, Open Sourcing Mental Illness, back in 2014 to really make me aware of how bad I was and how not normal what I was going through was. I came home and told the wife, and she was like, yep, you have all those things. I was like, yep, I know that now. And she was like, I've been telling you that for years. And I was like, yep, you have. But it still took, it took almost 3 years. Sorry, it took almost 3 years for me after that to still talk to a doctor about it. I mean, it was just one of those things that I really had to work up to, and things just had to get, things didn't have to get bad for me to get help, but it was definitely a situation where I just want to stop feeling this way, and I know there's something that can be done about it. Let's give that a shot, because something is better than just nothing and constantly being worried about things.
Absolutely. That was a point for me. There was a point for me where I was going through a lot of life change, and I think one of those life changes was accepting that I had anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder, and there's a bunch of other life change going on, but it got to the point where I was the most independent, the most happy I should be in life, and I was still paralyzed certain times, like couldn't get out of bed, so anxious. And so yeah, for me there was kind of like a turning point where if I didn't see someone the rest of my life, I didn't want to keep living like that. So
how do you feel that, or how have you seen mental health issues in the Ruby community? Because I know you spent, where I've been in the PHP community for a really long time, it seems like you've been in the Ruby community a good bit. And I know, at least locally, you've kind of crossed over into the PHP community a good bit, at least the local PHP community. But have you seen, and how do you feel like this kind of mental health issues have been treated in the Ruby community?
If there's one thing to be said about the Ruby community, it's that it's a welcoming community. And so I feel safe there, and I feel that they have a great amount of empathy. I would like to maybe see more awareness of it, which is one of the reasons I think Prompt was a good thing for me to join. And things like open sourcing mental illness, things like that. I'd like to see maybe more of that in the Ruby community, but overall I feel like it's safe and welcoming. And though we don't talk about, well, we do talk about it a good amount, but we don't specifically dive down into actual mental health issues, which I guess I'd like to see a little more of. But
Sure. Yeah, that's kind of where OSMI and Prompt both kind of are trying to be that voice. And I know several conferences have given both of our organizations platforms to talk about it. I mean, tons of conferences invite Ed every year to go talk about or give his open sourcing mental illness talk. I know the Prompt is very active in going through different conferences and sending speakers to conferences to talk about that kind of stuff. So it's always good to see that kind of stuff happening.
yeah, absolutely. I guess with OSMI, as you call it, is that your nickname?
Yeah,
for it?
I always either say OSMI or OSMI, and I can never. Somebody asked me the other day. I was like, They were like, is it OSMI or is it OSMI? I was like, man, it's to me. Look, I'm from the South. It's both.
Right. We'll say whatever we want.
That's right. That's what I say it is.
So that was actually my first OSMI was my first exposure to this kind of talking happening in our tech community. Specifically, I started following Ed, and that was so encouraging and so freeing. And like, I've never met Ed. I don't even know that I've ever talked to him, but I feel like I know him. And like, that kind of energy to put off in our community is amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where he still gets kind of you can mess with him. I mean, if you can walk up to him and you can talk to him about like any of these things that he's talked about. He gets up on stage and he bears his soul, and it's like the most humbling thing to watch. And I have been shopping a talk similar to that around the conferences, and I'm kind of hoping it gets rejected, and I'm kind of hoping it gets accepted, because I'm terrified to write that talk.
Sure.
But I feel like I know I could write that talk and it would help somebody, because Ed's talk helped me. But yeah, Ed still gets kind of starstruck a little bit when people come up to him and talk to him about, or starstruck's probably the wrong word, but it's very humbling for him when people come up and can relate to the stuff that he's talking about. And it just reaffirms everything that we're doing with OSMI or OSMI or open sourcing mental health, depending. And if you want to get formal, like top hat and coat formal, it's open sourcing mental illness Ltd.
Ooh.
That is the legitimate 501c3. That's what's on all the paperwork. And the only reason for that is because Indiana is weird, and for a nonprofit you have to have like limited or the Ltd or some other designation after your name.
I was just about to ask. That's not one I hear too often.
Yeah, I was like, I told Ed when we were doing this, I was like, man, if we were doing this in Tennessee, we would not have this stupid restriction.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I have to ask you. You seem like you've been stepping up a lot in OSMI. What's kind of your role these days in that?
So I am a board member for OSMI, and I am directly responsible for a lot of the social media. We have a ton of volunteers that help with stuff. Mainly my role is the social media stuff and keeping track of Ed. And if I wish somebody had told me that keeping track of Ed was like playing a Where's Waldo book that was in black and white, because that's kind of what keeping up with Ed is. I mean, screw the Kardashians. We need a Keeping Up with Ed TV show just so I can stay informed. Ed's a very busy guy, and as of a couple weeks ago, he's gone full-time into OSMI now, so I think that has increased my role a bit in terms of he's got to have somebody to brain dump to that can kind of keep stuff straight, so that's kind of my role. I'm also essentially the treasurer for OSMI. Now that Ed's drawing a paycheck, I stepped up to be able to handle all of the books and everything. That way everything's on the up and up, and there's more than one set of eyes on the bank account and all that fun stuff.
Sure.
Unfortunately, there is this business side to even a nonprofit, and even though we are a nonprofit, we still have bills to pay. We have an employee of sorts now, So yeah, there's bank account stuff, and let me tell you, if you have ever been tried, or if you've ever tried to get added to a bank account in a different state remotely, that is not a fun process. I could imagine I could probably get a very invasive body search, and it would probably be less invasive than what I went through to get onto the OSMI bank account. It was nuts, but I get it, right? I get it. It's an IRS thing. The banks they have to go by the law and everything. I totally get it, but holy crap, that was a long and drawn out process. And in the end, they still didn't ship me anything. They shipped it all to Ed, because I was supposed to get a little bank card and checks and everything. It all went to Ed. It's like, okay, I get it. It's not amusing, but I get it. So yeah, I mean, I definitely wear many hats in the OSMI organization, as does Ed. As does all of our volunteers. We have a handful of volunteers. We have a Slack channel that when somebody is really serious about volunteering, they're like, hey, how can I help? We invite them to the Slack channel, and if they come back the next day, they're a volunteer. That's kind of like if they can survive our sarcasm and how we treat each other in Slack, then they're probably going to be able to hang around and help. Because we are notoriously known for being very terrible to each other, especially Ed and myself. And it's all it's all playful. It's not a serious thing. It's all completely defense mechanism of making fun of each other, and it's like, no, you're a project that needs to be done or something like that. So
right.
Gary Hawken, another board member, is also very involved in the sarcasm and the wit that goes around. So
that's awesome. If you don't mind, I also have one other question. And
sure.
That is, so you were talking about shopping out, talking to some conferences. Do you kind of have, I assume you have kind of an abstract for that. Would you be
I do have
to
an
share
abstract.
That? You don't have to share the full thing. You can give me the summary.
So the title is the talk that changed my life wasn't technical. Is the title of the talk. I thought that was a good, eye-catching, holy crap, I need to at least read the abstract before I reject this talk title. So the abstract is essentially, hey, I'd like to talk about mental health stuff. No, not really. The abstract is much more of, hey, I went and saw this talk at a conference and it kind of changed my life, and I'd love to talk about how and why that was. I've submitted it to 2 conferences so far, and I've got 1 rejection, and the other conference is they're currently doing talk reviews now, so I might be 2 for 2 on that talk. We'll see. As an avid conference speaker submitter, I hate getting rejections, but the only way you get accepted is you get rejected. So
right.
My batting average is very low, even though I've been to a ton of events and I've been fortunate enough to go speak at a lot of events. My average is very, very, very low. It's depressingly low.
I very much understand that. It's tough. It's not only tough to get accepted at conferences, it's even tougher to get accepted at conferences when talking mental health. And
yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that's like a knock on conferences or organizers. It's a tough topic and it's hard to get in.
Yeah, and you also, as a conference organizer, you don't really want to bring this downer of a topic to your event where people are coming to have fun and learn and get this community feeling, and then here's this giant downer of a dude talking about how horrible his life is and how he's like medicated to hell and back. I mean, that's a risky move, and a lot of conferences have taken that risk on Ed specifically and others, and it's worked out. I feel like it's worked out very well in all the conferences I've seen. It's always good feedback back from the audience, and a lot of people, opening their eyes to the issues, because people who don't have mental health issues it's probably wrong to say they're oblivious, because I don't think they're really oblivious, but they don't get it, right? They don't understand the effect of it. They don't understand that it is a disease and that it is just as bad as like the flu. It's the flu you're never going to get rid of.
Right.
It's this disease where it's the cold that you have for the rest of your life. It's just this thing that you have to deal with. And it's not only that you have to deal with it, it's like your family has to deal with it. If you have a spouse, the spouse has to deal with it. If there's kids involved, the kids are going to have to deal with it eventually. Right. And even the kids may even have their own issues later on. I mean, there's just so much going on in that topic that it's kind of hard for a conference to be able to justify that, and I totally get that. I don't hold any bad feelings for any conference that rejects a mental health topic.
Yeah,
I get
absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
I think it also has to be presented the right way. It has to be this positive. This is how I deal with my issues, and I'm trying to raise awareness, not this. Oh, hey, I have these issues, and this is just what I have to deal with. That's probably less of a compelling talk to go see than something like what Ed does, and what I'm trying to do, where it's very much a awareness raising initiative, and it's a, hey, this is what I suffer from. It's okay to talk about that kind of stuff.
Right. I think that's one thing. So this, like I said, this will be my first actual mental health talk. I've given a few technical talks now. I think that's the thing I'm most worried about is I don't want to go up there and just talk about me. Like, I want to go up there and talk about everyone else, like who's there. And
Yeah, it's all about telling a story, though. I mean, just like a technical talk tells a story of identifying a problem and solving a problem, or explaining how you can solve a problem with a tool, a mental health or a soft skills talk is going to be the exact same thing. You just have to tell that story.
Right.
I did a talk. My first kind of non-technical talk was at the PHP cruise last summer, and it was essentially how I got involved in the PHP community and the local tech community. And it was essentially the story of how I fell into all this stuff, and I thought it went really well, and I got a lot of good feedback of the storytelling needed to be better, which it totally did. I mean, it was my first non-technical talk. So yeah, it's all about the storytelling and being able to pace your storytelling and keep it interesting. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all about you, but how your story impacted the others around you and how they could impact the audience is definitely a great way to relate that kind of story or topic, I feel like.
Yeah, that's the other side of it is, as much as like I don't want to make it about me, I feel like in order to talk about it, I at least have to validate that, hey, I can talk about this a little bit. Like,
yeah, you have to like establish some credibility, right? Because just like in a technical talk, you can come up there and talk about this framework, and you can be like, yeah, I've been working in this framework for 10 years. This is why you should listen to me. And you get up there and do a mental health talk, and hey, I have these disorders. This is why you can trust that I know what I'm talking about when I tell you these disorders suck.
right. Yeah, it'll be fascinating. I'm also really upset that you're not going on Coder Cruise. I know I've told you that.
Yeah. I really wish it would have worked out because we had a blast. Kara and I went last year to the PHP cruise. It was a blast. I'm envious that you're going and I'm not. But it worked out that I was asked to go to Laracon EU and speak and do a training day there. So
that rules. That's gonna be so much fun.
That's gonna be awesome. We're gonna have a little under a week in Amsterdam. So yeah, we're gonna totally go be tourists for a few days. It's gonna be great.
I was, even though I only program Ruby these days, I was going to go to Laracon this year. Because I went last year and I was like, this is so cool. But Coder Cruise gets back on Sunday and then I'd have to like fly out Monday. I was like, we can't make that work. So
yeah, that's exactly why I didn't go to Laracon last year, is because I would have literally had to fly from Baltimore, where the cruise left, to Louisville, where Laracon was. And I was at Laracon 2 years ago, and it was amazing. It was so much fun. I loved it in Louisville. I was kind of sad to see it go to New York, but
yeah, Louisville was cool. I lucked out getting to do that one. In New York, I've never been to, so I was super excited. But hey, get to go on a cruise. We're taking the whole family, so
that's
cool.
Awesome. Yeah, the cruise was so much fun. And the mixture of having a conference on a cruise was really, really cool, because it was depending on, I guess, how the cruise days are and what days you're at sea, what days you're doing conference stuff. For a PHP cruise, it was broken up really well, where the conference days were at sea, so there was that was the best days for conference stuff, and then on the days that you were in port, you were going off doing excursions with other people that were attending the conference. So it was a nice mixture of shop talk and shop conference experience and just personal interaction and not really not shop talk, but getting to know people at a personal level with their spouses and families and stuff outside of a technical context. That was really cool. So you're gonna have a lot of fun. Have you ever done a cruise before?
We did our first cruise last year, and it's the exact same ship we were on. So like we're like, okay, cool, we got this.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, I had done. It had been almost a decade since I had done one, and this was Kara's first one. It was so much fun. That's awesome.
This is our first one with a child, though, so we'll see.
Oh, wow.
He'll be 6 months, rolling on 7 months when we go, and
nice.
So my wife's on all the mommy blogs trying to figure out how to do this. But, yeah, it's a cool idea.
So it sounds like you're doing more speaking and stuff too, because you're speaking on Coder Cruise, right?
I am,
and you're speaking at another conference. You're doing your first mental health talk. Are you doing any other conferences this fall?
So I'm trying my hand at putting on a conference this fall.
Ah, that's right. Yes.
Trying to put on Southeast Ruby. And so far, so well. Though I'm embarrassed to admit I don't have a mental health talk yet. So, but I got time. It's in October. But yeah, so doing that. I got to speak at RailsConf this year, which was like Mecca for me to do that. That was cool. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's I always get real anxious before I speak, kind of naturally because of all my problems, and I have the icebreaker though, because I used to be so scared of public speaking that in college I actually took public speaking online.
I think that's cheating.
It's amazing is what it is. I filmed a YouTube video and I just had to get like 5 of my friends to sit in a row in front of me. And so that's my icebreaker I always go with to make myself feel a little more safe around speaking in front of people.
My go-to icebreaker is that I am an introvert cosplaying an extrovert at conferences. Usually gets a laugh or two, and yeah, it definitely helps. Or I just go up and say I do PHP, and people cry or laugh. So it's either way, right?
Nah. Do you do many non-PHP conferences?
I've done a handful. I did Open West a couple of years ago out in Utah. I did Dev Space at Huntsville the first year that they did that. I've done Tech Camp here in town, which is a Polyglot conference. I've submitted and hopefully going to Dev Space this year again. Cool. I need to try to find more. Unfortunately, I'm somewhat limited by. I need a conference that'll pay, speaker travel and that kind of stuff. So that's always helpful. Yeah. So I'm somewhat limited in what I can do. Like Dev Space, I do on my own. Because I know they're a small conference. They charge next to nothing for it, and they're just the first year. I was like, yeah, I don't mind going and being a speaker on my own dime, especially for the first year, because you always get to say I was at that conference the first year. That's
right.
There's just something so valuable about that. So that was worth going and doing, and also being at Huntsville. It's really cool because Deal News is based in Huntsville, and they're a big PHP shop, as well as Curse Gaming is the PHP stuff they do is all in Huntsville. So they usually have good turnouts there as well. So, and this year I'll have a friend that just moved to Huntsville to work at Curse, so I'll be able to go harass a friend of mine down there. So looking forward to that. But yeah, I'd love to do more Polyglot conferences just to kind of get better, and even just to go see non-PHP conferences and how they roll. Right? They're always, all the conferences are different.
Right. My actual first experiences speaking at conferences were all non-Ruby conferences. Actually, yeah. So the first one I think I did was Codestock in Knoxville, and I got out there and I was giving a talk on a Ruby framework called Hanami, and I was so excited, and I got there and they're like, "Who in here is a C# developer?" And the whole audience raised their hand. And I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, it's a big .NET conference, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's Polyglot conference, but there's a huge .NET group in Knoxville.
Yeah, it was mostly. I even went to like a JavaScript talk, and it was like, okay, here's how we do this in .NET, and I was like, whoa. And then Con Fu is a really cool one I got to go to this year.
Yeah, Con Fu looks really awesome.
It's cool, and they take care of their speakers super well. I got to meet a lot of Ruby people and a lot of non-Ruby people. It's really cool.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
There's some cool stuff out there.
Awesome.
It's hard though because I want to stay in my little Ruby world sometimes.
Yeah, it's nice to get out of that bubble though, and
yeah.
especially when you get to meet people from other communities.
Yeah, that I is involved in like watching the Laravel community as I am. Like you would think I just program Laravel, but I don't. I program Ruby still.
Thanks for taking the time to join us. This has been another episode of the Open Sourcing Mental Illness Podcast.